Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Kayley Melham. Kayley, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Always fun doing ones with you. So Kayley is the resident Smarter Marketer in-house marketer. So she essentially is the lady behind podcast. She organizes it. She cajoles our guests. She puts together questions and directions and intros and deals with me missing things and turning us late and changing my mind on stuff. But I think our two pods that we've done together have I think been the top listened to pod. Is that right?
I feel quite flattered.
Yeah, when I'm the only constant in all the pods, so therefore it means that it's because of you, not because of me, that those two pods have ranked so well. So we had an episode last year, which was kind of the top marketing questions for 2023, and I think that might actually have been the number one ranking pod, most listened to pod of the year. So we thought, let's do it again. Let's go around for one more year. So I guess how have you decided to approach this?
Well, we recently ran a webinar on digital marketing in Australia in 2024, and we had some really good questions coming in from a lot of the registrants to the webinar. And I thought, what better than to answer some of those questions on the pod, as well as just some general questions and themes and ideas that are running around in the industry. So to kick it off, first question, I feel like this is maybe the easiest or could be the hardest. How has the marketing landscape evolved over the past year, and what do you think the trends are that people should consider in 2024?
I think I always find the general ones really hard to answer. Yeah, so the webinar, I think it was for B&T, we had about 800 people register for the webinar. So we actually did get loads of questions and lots of commonality, which I think is good, and which really, really helps. So look, I think in terms of what marketing has looked like in the past year in Australia, been a year of change, I think. Like the economy slowing down, I think in many parts has kind of had an impact on marketers, or I think often when economies tighten, when budgets and P&Ls get tight in businesses, I think often marketing is one of the first things that gets questioned. So I feel that in lots and lots of industries and lots of businesses with the marketers that we speak to, I think there's been a lot of pressure on budgets this year, a lot of pressure on proving and demonstrating return on investment. And with that, I think it's challenging. And I think it then often does force marketers' hands to try to be doing short-term marketing that drives demand and performance in the short instance, rather than investing maybe in the most appropriate marketing for their business. But that's probably a slightly separate issue. And then I think more macro, I mean, lots hasn't changed, right? Like Google still drives 95% of search in the country, whether it's paid or organic. Most businesses get most of their traffic from Google. The kind of, I think we've had a lot of kind of hyperbole around the death of Facebook. Like it's still definitely, for all the clients that we run at Rocket and basically everyone I've spoken to, Facebook outperforms TikTok ads in terms of driving revenue and performance and leads. Not to say that the massive continued rise of TikTok hasn't shaken things up. I think particularly from an organic viewpoint, we haven't got the updated TikTok numbers of users. I think it was 8 million in Australia earlier in the year. So it'd be fascinating next year what we see there, and fascinating as to what the ad spend is in that platform. But we're seeing huge amount of time being spent in that platform, but definitely kind of seeing it as a place of getting cheap impressions. If you're running organic, potentially getting lots of virality with your content. But yeah, lots has remained the same. You know, LinkedIn being a core social platform for B2B, Google driving search, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, depending on what sort of business and clients you're trying to hit. So yeah, I think a lot has stayed the same. But I think in terms of the big trends for next year, I think I'd say AI will continue to help us as marketers to do our jobs better. Like it definitely hasn't. I mean, so much of what we do in the agency is the same now as what it was 12 months ago before we were using AI. So much of it is different. I don't see it as stealing marketers' jobs if those marketers are embracing ChatGPT and Bard and other platforms. So think we'll obviously see massive leap forward in that space. It'll change how we do things. I think in terms of the actual marketing environment in the country as it relates to digital, I think we'll continue to see TikTok growing. I think we'll see the continued rise of social search, where users hasn't heavily eroded Google's volumes that I've seen, but people turning to things like TikTok to actually search for products and services where they once might have turned to Google. We're kind of starting to see that as a trend. I think we'll continue to see outdoor media continues to grow in terms of seeing it being bought digitally and programmatically. And then I think the economy, I'm far from an economist, but so we'll see how things go there, right? And I think every year this sector's doing well, the sector's not doing well. But I think it's not going to be, you wouldn't predict it to be kind of this boom 12 months for marketers with hugely increased budgets and less scrutiny on performance. I think we're going to see probably more of that. But yeah, that's kind of how I'd see things.
Yeah. And then off the back of that, I think talking about trends is one thing, but challenges is a kind of different area. And I know that you spoke about this in the webinar, and I found these 3 points also to be really super relevant, and a lot of them challenging, I feel, what is said in the industry in terms of attribution and AI and what have you. So what would you say the 3 biggest challenges are the marketers are facing?
Yeah, that's it. Like, we put a lot of thought into the content for that webinar because it was a good, reasonably sized audience, and we kind of broke it down into three challenges, right? Which are the 3 that when respective clients come to Rocket, they're often raising with us, kind of going, we're struggling with this, or lots of pressure is being put on us in our job because of that. So the first one is measurement, right? But I think we've kind of like digital started off as this whole challenger to that adage in marketing, which is, I know half my budget's wasted, I just don't know which half. And Google Ads and paid social to some extent 10, 15 years ago, you could kind of demonstrate to a business, spend X, get Y, keep pumping, money into digital and we can prove return. It's just not like that anymore. And we've kind of got probably a few different things taking place there. I think one of it is just attribution and the reality that the path to purchase in most organizations, most businesses is complex. It's online, it's offline, it's multi-device, it's multi-stakeholder, and marketers, and probably less marketers and more business owners and other stakeholders, think that all the data that they're relying upon in Google and other analytics platforms is completely 100% accurate and right. And it's just not. Attribution is nearly impossible for the vast majority of businesses. I think some e-commerce businesses in really transactional spaces, some service businesses in really transactional spaces, you can get a high degree of certainty around what return your spend is bringing you. But most businesses, most marketers, most business owners I'm speaking to, if they're saying I'm going to make every decision based on data, I kind of challenge that assertion pretty vocally and pretty strongly. And so that's just the attribution piece is missing for basically all businesses, and it will never be solved perfectly. And I'm happy to argue that with anyone. And then we look at privacy and the way that privacy changes, the fact that Google is starting to move to a cookieless world. We're going to see from January onward that 1% of Chrome users in Australia will move to cookieless. We look at all the issues around iOS and tracking there, where we can't tell if someone's opened up an email anymore from HubSpot or Campaign Monitor and MailChimp. Google doesn't pass information through like it once did. So measurement is challenging. It's only going to get worse. That's the reality of it. And so I think it is more about us better understanding what data can do for us and what it can't. So I think that's a big one. And I think it's about marketers educating themselves and, more importantly, educating non-marketers as to the data you're looking at has lots of imperfections, and that's okay. Better than what we probably had 30 years ago, but don't rely on it solely.
And I think the point that I like that you brought up in recent episodes before is the idea of being data informed and not data informed and not data driven. Like having that balance of, I'm using it, I'm using it to help inform the decisions that I'm making, but it's not everything. It's not the be all and end all, and I'm not going to completely change my budget or my tactics because that's telling me exactly what I want it to.
100%. Like if anyone in your business says we're going to make all of our decisions based on data, then you tell them that you're going to make terrible decisions. That's the reality of it. And I think most marketers are getting to that point. The second point probably segues nicely into it. And for me, that it's this continued pressure on marketers to invest in short-term marketing over investing in marketing that is actually going to work for the business. And the more pressure that gets put on budget, the more that dynamic exists in businesses. So we see it all the time. Marketers coming to us, hey, good news, you've got 300 grand to spend in the next 3 months on this huge campaign to drive leads. And you kind of speak to them and go, well, what's the buyer journey? How does it look? And it's a 4-year buyer cycle. And, 97% of that market isn't in market at any moment in time to actually procure those services. So we're trying really hard to educate clients and prospective clients to look at the 95/5 rule, the reality that most of your customers probably not in market at this moment in time, and then the 60/40 rule around what percentage of your marketing budget should go into long-term marketing activities, what percentage should go into performance and short-term activity, and trying to arm marketers with information to help them explain in a data-driven way to the wider business that it's not how marketing works, and actually the like they say, the long and the short of it, which is an awesome book by a study by Binet and Fields, which we're kind of advocating that our clients take that to C-suite and sales teams that are saying everything should be in this bottom of the funnel stuff. So I think that pressure on short-term results, often in environments where it's just not going to come. So just how do you better educate and set your business up for long-term success? And then I think
and
the
one of
AI
my favorite.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say one of my favorite points is the only invest in short term, you're only going to get the short term results. Whereas if you invest in long term, you can have the benefit of sustainability as well as that short term
100%.
surge.
And we see it, like, it's not just marketing theory, right? We see it in the agency every day, the clients of ours that have the mix right, that have the investment in long-term activities. They just generate cheaper leads, they close leads faster. It's not BS. So I think it's a big one for me. And then I think the third one, we've talked about it a lot, right? And I think as marketers, we're probably a bit sick of it, but it is AI. I think it's if you sit there kind of doom scrolling on your LinkedIn, just I'm not keeping up, I'm failing. It's not constructive, but you have to have a foot, I think, in each camp. One is, look, I've just got to focus on my job and what my targets are and what things I can do to best drive value for my business. But you have to be there looking at AI, adopting it. I think adopting it in a lot of the tools we're already using, whether it's HubSpot or Marketing Cloud, or if you're on Google Suite or if you're on the Microsoft stack, just getting used to it. If your design teams, depending on what platform they're using for design, but just staying across the potential of AI, understanding that it's only going to get better. But like, unless you're speculating and investing and intending on building a startup business in the space, I think just focusing in on what you need to do rather than obsessing over how it's coming to take your job. But I think where we're going to be in a year's time will be very different to where we are now, right? With the things that AI is doing for us as marketers. But definitely something to keep I think being alert, not alarmed would be what I'd say there.
Nice one. Moving on, I think there is a lot of discussion around LinkedIn and Meta, and I feel like there are a lot of resources out there and we've had pods on them before, but any advice on social media platforms kind of sitting outside those mainstream? And I think the three that come to mind would be TikTok, Spotify, Pinterest.
Yeah, question. It does feel like we're moving into like a slightly more fragmented landscape as it relates to digital media. It felt for so long that it was kind of Google on the search side, it was Facebook and Insta on the B2C social side, and then it was LinkedIn on the B2B side. Feels that the way that programmatic's moving, the access to high quality inventory within programmatic and BVOD and digital outdoor, better quality audience data in programmatic than I think we've ever had before. And then you start looking at things like Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, but now TikTok. I think we have more decisions to make as marketers, and definitely within Rocket, we're running Pinterest ads if potentially in kind of fashion and houses and property and whatever it might be, e-commerce. On the B2B side, we're using products like Capterra, which are starting to drive quite a significant amount of volume for clients, where I think previously that wasn't necessarily the case. So it does feel that the mix, hasn't revolutionized in the past 12 months, but it feels like there is this gradual shake up of things and trying to move probably a little bit more towards where are my people, who are my people, where do they hang out, and where do they hang out in the context with which I'm trying to reach them. I'd ran Fishkin on the pod earlier on in the year, and I think it was a really interesting throwaway line. And you kind of said every American drives in a highway. It doesn't mean that highway advertising is the best place to promote your product. And I think it's just because everyone's on Facebook or just because everyone's on TikTok doesn't necessarily mean they're the best places for your particular business. So I think it is also a little bit looking at context and what people are expecting to see in a particular channel. So, but yeah, that'd be my feeling. I think there's the numbers, like LinkedIn's pretty stable in Australia in terms of number of users and activity. Insta's still growing slowly. Like Facebook's actually not declining as much as people would like to think, and the time in platform is still quite strong. So it really is. I think you've got choice now as a marketer. There's different places to play, and I think it is about just looking at your strategy and making sure you're reaching people in the right place.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just about the platform itself, but definitely the type of content that you're creating. And I think that does kind of sit more into the creative side, and we'll touch on that later. But it's not only that they're going to be sitting on the platform, but how are they interacting? What's the type of behavior? What kind of content do they like to see? Is it more informational? Is it more like company culture? Is it more product reviews? Obviously, knowing your audience and knowing who your ideal buyer is vital. But I think that has a huge play into it too.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Jumping into email, future of email marketing. How can businesses keep their email campaigns effective and especially compliant with regulation?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, like the e-consultancy survey that comes out every year out of the UK, every year, email marketing is the channel that marketers report gives the best return on investment. And every year it's underinvested in by marketers in Australia. It's kind of crazy. It's I mean, I firmly believe that word of mouth referrals are the best form of marketing. And in terms of digital, then like email marketing generally will be that for your business. So, I mean, it's first of all starts with an audience and data, right? So
having a database.
Yeah, that's it. So how do you acquire a database? Obviously we're trying to build a database of email addresses and contacts and prospects, customers that actually want and have opted in to receive the information. I think that's a given these days. It's really unsexy, but it's so important. If we look at the way that all the privacy changes that are they're not going back in the box, right? And so us as marketers, we have less than we've had before in many ways. Privacy changes are going to make it harder. All the platforms try so hard to keep users in the platform. So whether it's TikTok or LinkedIn or even with Google and the idea of zero click searches where you do your search and you find the answer on the first page, you don't go to a publisher's website. AI is only going to probably drive that forward even more, where people will be locked into Bard and ChatGPT and potentially voice search. So having an email database, having really high quality first party data is going to be more important in 5 years' time than it is now. So yeah, you've got to have a process. You've got to get adoption from you need the tech to capture. You need your marketing team, your sales team, your customer support teams to be bought in. You want to be able to segment based on reasonable range of variables, lapsed customer, existing customer, tier one, bought these products, whatever's relevant for your business. And then obviously with email, I think the cost to send and the platforms, all that stuff's just getting easier and easier. I think nothing's really changed in terms of, should emails be glossy and shiny or should they be plain text? That's always a depends question. Should I send them daily or monthly? It's always a depends question. Right message to the right person at the right time. But I think just the actual doing it is probably my biggest piece of advice there. And we do it ourselves, right? Like it's one of the leading channels for us as a business. We invest in high quality content. We try to send good quality information to our database. And when the time's right, people reach out to it. So it's thoroughly recommended.
And I think maybe a slight tangent, but tying back into what we were talking about before in terms of the long of it and the short of it and having that balance of performance and brand, I kind of just wanted to bring up how there's not a particular platform or a particular channel that is associated with short-term versus long-term marketing. And I think email can be a really great example of that, where you can send out an email and say 30% off sale if you're an e-com business and really drive that bottom of funnel short-term marketing. But you also do have the potential to constantly connect with your audience, keep them engaged, share good content, and really just keep your brand top of mind.
Yeah, it's a great point. And like when COVID hit, our client that had strong SEO, strong email marketing databases were the ones that could better weather the storm. And it was the clients who just always had existed on short-term paid media really struggled, right? As it when those things had to be cut. And it's a good point. It's because often that long-term marketing versus short-term marketing get conflated, where this particular channel, search or email, is short-term or long-term. And in the webinar, we use the example of a YouTube ad, right? So we had example of Qantas doing Europe's on sale, book now for next summer, YouTube ad. And then also Qantas running a YouTube ad with the whole, I still call Australia home. So one very much long-term brand building value in the
One
brand.
of my favorite ads.
The great ad. So yeah, but I think that's right. In the email one's a really good example where it gives you that long-term marketing kind of technique going. But then if you need to, you can dial it up and get some short-term marketing happening.
We spoke about it a little bit before, but I think creatives, I don't know if there is as much emphasis on it because people are focusing on who are we targeting and do we have, messaging. But in the visual platforms, whether it's Meta ads, LinkedIn ads, YouTube, whatever, creatives are super important. So do you have any tips for how businesses can maybe deliver that good creative or that good messaging and really transform what the current assets are that they have?
Yeah, totally. There's a really good Nielsen study that came out last year, and it was based on all digital media type campaigns, large and small, thousands of data points, and it was then looking at what had the biggest impact on the success or otherwise of that campaign, and creative came in as the number one most important lever. So I think it was like 54 or 56% of effectiveness came from the creative itself. We see it in the agency. We'll often work with clients and they'll bring creative in and it's just not built to perform. It's just badly conceived. It doesn't take into account the people we're trying to move and why we're trying to move them. We do have a really strong creative team and we will rework assets and you will keep targeting the same, budget the same, and literally just switch up the creative and you'll have 2x, 3x, 4x kind of impact. And you can still get really good improvement by changing targeting and other things within a campaign, but I think it's the easiest lever to pull. And that doesn't mean that you should just be there willy-nilly changing your creative. If you've got a campaign that's working and you've got a message that you need to get in front of your market consistently to leave that long-term brand imprint, keep doing it. Do not change it. Don't get the shiny toy thing going.
If it's not broken, don't fix it.
100%. But I dare say that most campaigns, most creative that we see is pretty average and not necessarily kind of creative built for platform. So yeah, I think creative is huge. As we know, like we're moving more into a kind of movement video type world. Doesn't mean that certain statics don't work at certain times. Being contextual, if you're outdoor, it's going to be very different to if you're YouTube, if you're Facebook, TikTok. So being highly contextual based on where that ad's going to be seen and by whom. But yeah, I think creative is often something that is an afterthought. It's often we've got this big media budget and this is where we're going to put all the spend. And it's like let's put ads together without kind of going, hang on, this campaign will live or die on the creative. So that's I think from an industry viewpoint, it's kind of interesting. Like we because of the background of the business, we've always had a really strong creative competency in the agency. But you look at other performance agencies around the country and they've all either bought or merged with kind of creative agency. And even at Rocket this year, we've hired really senior creative director. We've hired copywriters because to bolster the team along with existing designers and other team members, because to get those channels working, to get Spotify and TikTok and Facebook and even Google, right? Like getting people to your onto your website, you need to be moving them through in a way I think that was kind of easier previously. So yeah, I think creative is a huge area for focus.
Yeah. And it's not a one size fits all either. And I think we've definitely spoken about this before, but you don't take a YouTube ad and then just pop it onto Instagram and assume that the creative is going to perform the same way for both audiences. Like you really have to cater your creative to the different channels that you're focusing in.
100%.
Question 6. So how, and I feel like this is a big one, tying back into the attribution and the branding that we were talking about before, how can businesses effectively measure their ROI, especially in the multi-channel marketing environment where you don't often know where people are receiving
Yeah.
your messages or engaging with you?
Yeah, totally. Look, I mean, we've all moved to GA4 now, right? I think there's certain businesses that'll be running Adobe or other product stacks, but I presume that everyone listening is no longer on Universal Analytics. So, I mean, obviously we're running GA4. We're looking at probably data-driven attribution, which is Google's attempt at trying to use AI and to try to use its machine learning and its vast try to put together what a buyer journey looked like for the website. I think it's obviously a good place to start. I think you use your analytics platform as a place to be making decisions around how the different channels kind of compare. I think you're then going into platform and making certain decisions there. Obviously, your Facebook numbers aren't going to marry up to what is being said in Google. I think you really need to be aware of the limitations of data. I think if you coming into it thinking that what you see in Google is an accurate depiction of everything that happened on your website, you need to know that it's not. It's an estimate of what's happening. You need to know that when you look at direct traffic, that's not just direct traffic. That's people that have come via dark social, that a lot of the social platforms don't actually give attribution through to Google. So a lot of that direct traffic will have come from certain social platforms and so certain messaging platforms. And then it depends a lot on the nature of what you're selling, right? Like if you're an emergency plumber or you're selling a $25 widget through ecom, then you might be getting pretty close, just relying on digital. If you're selling 7-figure ERP software or you're a professional services provider and, a lot of your stuff comes into your fee earners, if you're a law firm or whatever it might be, into your sales team, you start building up anecdotal data. Don't make decisions on, how did you hear of us drop downs on your website? Have your sales team, have your whoever's speaking to clients, customer service, how did you hear of us? How did you first hear of us? If a lot of your activity is in social, then social media listening tools, brand uplift studies. If you're just relying on GA4 and kind of going, this is what's happening, you're going to be underweighting most of your long-term activity. You're going to be overweighting your paid search, your paid social, your SEO, and those channels are bread and butter channels for Rocket. So I'm not saying they don't work, but if you're relying on GA4, you're going to think that's what's driving most of your activity, and you're going to be missing out on a lot of stuff that's happening offline or is happening online but can't be measured. Podcasts, videos, a whole bunch of things. Anything with months paths to purchase and multi-stakeholder, start with the viewpoint that you actually can't measure most stuff. And then anything you can measure is a bonus. Don't think you can measure everything.
Yeah. Nice. We've mentioned a couple, or you've mentioned a couple earlier in the episode, aside from plugging the podcast itself. Do you have any other content, books, courses, suggestions that you can give that people can kind of look into a little bit further?
Yeah, good.
Like you've mentioned the long and the short of it.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Good one. I think that's one for me you should read it yourself to actually understand that you're doing your business a disservice if you're not investing in long-term marketing activities that will bear no fruit tomorrow. That's a starting point. So read that. And then if you already know that and you already believe it, but your MD or your CEO or the head of sales who has the ear of the CEO doesn't believe that, buy a copy and put it on their desk and go, please read it. And don't do it when they've given you budget expecting leads. Give it to them in the cool light of day and say, let's have a chat about it and how we could recalibrate marketing as a result. I think that's a good one. I think from a more like ongoing basis, I love all the Brand Fishkin stuff. So SparkToro blog, and you can just sign up to his email. Probably comes in once every 2 weeks or so. Just a generally really thoughtful piece. Mark Ritzen's awesome. The Mark Ritson marketing mini MBA is awesome. a lot of his stuff's in Marketing Week, and they do I think it's almost a daily EDM, maybe weekly, I'm not sure, but I get all their stuff. I love it. I think the like industry publications are good. B&T, Ad News, Marketing Mag, just good to kind of know a bit more what's happening in the
Yeah.
space. And then if in terms of courses, like as I said, the Mark Ritson one's great from an overall marketing viewpoint. Julian Cole, who was a guest on the pod, we've done people in our team have done his strategy finishing school. So if you're working in strategy, it's a really thoroughly recommended course. If you're in kind of digital marketing, the digital marketer course is quite good. The HubSpot training's good. I think Marketo, if
Mhm.
you're more enterprise, their training's quite good. Yeah, that's a bit of a ramble, but yeah, I think that's like they're the kind of sources that I like to lean into.
Yeah, definitely. This question gets asked all the time. I think it got asked quite a number of times leading up to our webinar, and we seem to get lots of responses asking it. So, with so much change happening in the industry, so many platforms, what are the fundamentals that people need to be focusing on to get
Mm.
their mix right?
Yeah, it's really hard. Like as an agency owner in a space where we have a reasonable number of clients and lots of experts in lots of areas, and I've been in the space and I'm not an in-house marketer where I've got a million other things to try to stay on top of. It's really hard, and the speed of change is, I don't know. I think it's like you view it one way or the other. It's terrifying and scary, or change is a constant and run with it and see it as a positive. And I choose obviously to view it that way. Love the quote, what's happening in the marketing world is generally less important than what's happening in your world. So I think
Yeah.
don't sit there doom scrolling, freaking out, worrying you're not keeping up. Like I think you stand a greater chance of making mistakes and doing your business a disservice by jumping onto a shiny toy rather than actually just sticking to the quarter, the year, targets for the year. Look, this is what we're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
whilst also keeping an open mind. And I do. This is totally self-serving, but I do feel that um, one of the big values an agency brings is that perspective, where
Yeah.
if you're a marketer, good marketing team doing good work, you're on one account, all you're seeing is that business. I think you reaching out to someone like Rocket and saying, "Hey, are we on the right track here? Can you review our strategy? Can we potentially work together at a certain level on certain things?" It gives you that benefit. I say to prospective clients all the time, if you can get something done to a high degree of competency in-house, you should be doing it in-house. And then you want to use your agency partners for things that they're expert at, or you just can't do in-house due to
Yeah.
economies of scale or budget. So that would be my advice on that.
Nice. Last question. Exciting question. How do you influence senior leaders or your C-suite to understand what's happening in marketing at the moment? So I feel like we've spoken about a lot of trends, a lot of challenges. How do you then best get that information across to someone who really might not be involved in the marketing world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's you hear a lot of marketers, oh, that person doesn't buy in or they don't believe in marketing or those, negative approach. If you're a senior marketer, it's your job to educate non-marketers in your business as to how marketing works. So I think it's a bit of a cop out to kind of, oh, they don't believe it, they don't understand it. Well, educate them. And if if you're not being taken seriously, then I think you have to. And if that person's not going to change, isn't going to change, or it's um, a lunatic that won't that won't read the long and the short of it and actually kind of go, yeah, I get it. Then you might question whether you're in the right place of employment. Like that's because you're never going to get buy-in, and you're always going to not be properly valued. So I think it's the job of us as marketers to understand the role of marketing. It's our job to understand that we're the market's voice in our businesses. Um, it's our job to read the long and the short of it and to send that data throughout the business and explaining that not how marketing works. And I get it. It's hard. It's frustrating, but definitely don't just sit in your box presuming that people should know this stuff. So I think like, first of all, I think the second point to that is the time to do it isn't when you're trying to defend your monthly results or your quarterly results, or you've sat there and taken 100 grand for the next 3 months to drive these leads when you knew at the beginning it wasn't going to work. You
Yeah.
need to do it in the cool light of day. So I think that education piece, sit down and book in a meeting in the quiet time of January just to try to educate marketers, non-marketers as to how this stuff works. Um, So they're kind of two ways. And then I think it's, try to remain informed yourself on what things do mean and what they don't mean and what that metric means or whatever it might be. And I do find that often you can bring in external, so bringing in your agency partners to actually present to your board, to present to your CEO, like we do it all the time, right? Like we're often coming in and we'll deliver the news. Like I'll happily sit there and explain that, yeah, well, that's not really how SEO works, or it's not how digital marketing works, or it's not how marketing works, or, you're trying to achieve this objective, but it's a 3-year buyer journey and you want those results next month, not happening. So
Not
I think,
realistic.
so I think that'd be kind of the way that I'd be approaching it.
Nice one. That's it. That's all the questions.
That's all the questions Kaylee's got.
That's all of them.
What else? Is there anything else you want to chat about for next year, or are we done? Hopefully we've given some value to listeners as to what to maybe ways they can approach next year.
Yeah, no, I think that is really good. And I would just say that if any listener does have a question or a topic that they would really like us to dive into, or even a guest, reach out. Like you can send an email to jamesl@rocketagency.com.au, plug in your email info. But yeah, and we can do an episode on it because I feel like that's the important thing, that content remains relevant, and it's what
Yeah, I love it.
what you guys
And
want
I
to
think,
hear.
any guests as well, any guests you think could be great, or episode that we had with a certain guest where you feel that guest could talk about something
Oh,
else. I think that's always a good one. So yeah, cool. So thanks for listening, and Kayley, thanks for the awesome job that you continue to do on the pod.
thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Kayley.